Yes, yes, we are live. And for those of you in the chat room or watching at a later date, thanks, by the way, to those of you in our chat room. The Hockey Buzz chat room is right below this, and if you check it out when we're live, you can talk to us and we'll interact with you. So, we're going to be joined at some point today by Julie Robenheimer, who is getting into a building of some sort. I'm not sure where. She says, I'm still getting into the building, is the text I got. I'm not sure what building that is, but she's going through security.
Fort Knox.
Yes, so we'll see where it is. Julie has her own compound, apparently. But watching behind me today, we have one of my favorite all-time video games. This game is why I was friends with somebody, I have to admit, in junior high, because I literally wanted to go over to his house and play this game. This is, and that's a little bit unfair because he was a good guy, but I love this game. So if you guys have to name it, though. This is one of the first. This is the best game ever put out for hockey at the time it came out. This blew everything else out of the water at that time, and was the first game that actually had penalties where you can trip guys. So that's a little clue for those of you in the hockey world. But let's get going. We got plenty to talk about today, and today is the 14th. So if you're filing your taxes 6 months late, you got to get working. Tomorrow is your day. Here we go. I say this because I just got mine out this week. Here we go. Ready? Hello, Hockey World. It is Tuesday, October 14th, 2014.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Kevin Allen. I'm USA Today Sports.
I'm Josh Rimmer.
And I am Eklund. And you're watching the Hockey Buzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. And yes, indeed, we are here. And man, oh man, Steven Stamkos is back. Yep, he seems like he's healthy, and Victor Hedman seems like he's going to win the Norris Trophy in his career. And my goodness, right now things are going well in Tampa, who all the stars lined up perfectly last night for the rematch of the embarrassing playoff series that they lost out in last year in 4 games. But so this whole thing, I mean, for those of you who didn't know, Stamkos had 3 goals last night, and Victor Hedman's leading the NHL in points as a point scoring right now, I believe. Right ahead of Mr. Brock from the Islanders, so we definitely it's early, of course, but these are some interesting points that we're seeing. And Stamkos puts together a hat trick last night, so quite the night. And the one thing about Stamkos that I want to know, first of all, I want everybody on the panel to decide and write down somewhere how many goals he's going to score this year in your opinion. My question for Kevin and Mike and Josh is this, and we'll start with you, Kevin. This whole distinguishing thing that we see between superstars and stars has always been something that's fascinated me. You have stars and you have superstars. And right now, we have Crosby's, I think, he's a legitimate superstar. Kind of on the show we did yesterday with Eric Tahashik, which you can watch in this blog as well, we talked about, generational players or what have you. Maybe they're superstars. How do you define a superstar, Kev, versus a star?
That's a great question. I mean, what we were talking about as generational players, that's limited to, in my mind, how Gretzky, Lemieux, or Rocket Richard, Bobby Hull, Sidney Crosby, Alex Ovechkin. But to me, the superstar status also equates to popularity, even beyond what happens on the ice. Sidney Crosby not only performs on the ice, but away from the game, people know who he is. Obviously, by scoring the big goal in 2010, Americans, who didn't know anything about hockey, became aware of him as well. He's on commercials, and Ovechkin, I think, has had that unique status as well. He seems to, he was dating a tennis star for a while.
That's right.
There's a lot going on. So to me, a superstar sort of goes beyond what actually happens in his or her arena.
That's okay. So it sort of transcends the sport more into the pop culture to a degree. There's a pop culture aspect to it. And then you have players who, in the past, we've seen guys so generational. You would talk about Wayne Gretzky, but what would you put How about where's Stamkos fall into this? I mean, he's not in the pop culture very much right now. He's kind
Yeah,
of
no, I think he pays a little bit of a price because Tampa Bay doesn't have the national following. In the world of franchises, it's still a newbie. But I think in terms of on ice performance, I think I'm giving it away right now, but I think he'll score 60 goals this season. I mean, he's such a premium goal scorer, and I think his team this season is going to really help him because it's going to be winning a lot of games, and they're going to have the puck a lot, in my opinion. And Hedman's rise has helped him as well. But it's interesting. I was actually on a plane with Stamkos. He was coming back from the All-Star game, and he had to connect through Detroit to go back home. And of course, I got off in Detroit, and he and I walked through the concourse together. And he was virtually walking without anybody recognizing. And I said to him, I said, "You can never do this in Canada." And he laughed, and he said, "Yeah, you're right." So I think he just doesn't have quite that notoriety. But in terms of on the ice, I think he's a superstar. I mean, he has the same impact almost as Crosby on the ice.
Yeah, and maybe I think the best goal scorer in the NHL, it would be pure goal scorer. I'd put Tavares up there with him. Maybe that would be mine.
I think Ovechkin's still the best.
I think Ovechkin's the best. Okay.
I mean, 9 seasons, 5 50-goal scorer, 4 50-goal seasons. I mean, I don't know. It's you're picking among elite level players. There's really no loser there. There are different kinds of scores. Obviously, Ovechkin, has the searing shot and drives in, and Stamkos can score off the rush. So it's interesting.
Yeah, he's right there. Yeah, I do agree. Kind of think back to where do you put him, Mike? I'm going to throw my 2 cents out just real quickly before I do. And we were joined by Julie Robenheimer, or at least apparently going to be joined by her shortly. And there she is now. Hello, Julie.
Hi, guys.
Hi, Julie.
Hold on.
Hey, Julie.
So you can't hear us or see us or talk to us, but there she is now as we speak.
Here I am.
Okay, we're going to guess where you are. Don't tell us. We're going to guess. Kevin, you've been in a lot of NHL places. Is this an NHL place or a college place? Let us know that first.
NHL.
NHL place. Okay. All right. We're gonna try to guess. We're discussing Stamkos and whether he's a superstar or a star right now. Here's my thing. I grew up in the crazy 80s, right? So where you had Gretzky, Messier, and you had Howard Chuck. And Howard Chuck to me was a superstar as well, but completely sort of underrated in that whole world because he was on the Winnipeg Jets. And but Howard Chuck was also putting up ridiculous point totals at that time. And I kind of put Stamkos in the Howard Chuck world. Where I put Crosby in the Gretzky world. Mike, anything to that in your mind?
Well, I mean, there's a level of stratification, and like in the era that you're talking about, it's Gretzky and Lemieux, and then you had that level, like you said, Howard Chuck, Trottier, probably a little earlier, during the Islanders era, Mike Bossy. I mean, right now, currently, I think the only guys who you can really consider superstars, like Kevin said, are Crosby and Ovechkin. After that, you have a level of I would say, maybe 8 to 10 guys who I would consider stars. Tavares and Stamkos and PK Subban and a few others. They're impact players. They affect the game, but they don't have the notoriety. And actually, Sidney Crosby. He's not. I mean, he's got that superstar thing based on his talent. He's not I don't think a superstar personality. He's a very very nice guy, and his face is very noticeable, but he's not that ebullient personality like a PK Subban is. And a guy like Patrick Kane you see on commercials constantly now in the U.S. and he's based in Chicago, the big media market. So that's part of it, but. I mean, I think
too. He's in that Howard Chuck world for me too.
Yeah. Now, as for your prediction, I predicted earlier during the summer when we were talking about Stamkos, I said between 55 and 60 goals. I don't think he'll go over 60, but if he plays the Montreal Canadiens every game, maybe he'll eclipse that by the All-Star break.
Yeah, I'll go with you with an 80s comparison, too, and I think this is a real apt one, too, given the team he plays for. When Lemieux and Gretzky were Kings, I used to write that Steve Yzerman was the best player in the mere mortal division.
Right.
I think that's where we are with Stamkos. I think the Stamkos and Yzerman, I think, are pretty comparable, where in the hockey world, they're kingpins for sure. But outside, Steve Yzerman didn't really have the same cachet as Gretzky or Lemieux, even though he was an incredibly impactful player. So that's what I would use. Howard Chuck is a good one as well, because those two players, in my mind, even though they again had different styles, were similar in the impact they had on the game.
Yeah, and then there was Denny Savard too in my mind. Like these are people from that era that I really kind of remember as being that good. But my question for Julie is this: is Ovechkin still a superstar in your mind? Because this is the thing that I've noticed lately, and someone pointed this out, which I thought was really interesting. That if about 3 or 4 years ago it was always who's better, Crosby or Ovechkin, and this year when the rankings came out, like the Hockey News had Ovechkin, I think, at 18th. So that's a big drop off from who's better, Crosby or Ovechkin.
That's kind of a ridiculous ranking, though.
Yeah.
No,
it is a ridiculous ranking for him to be so low, but I don't think it's ridiculous for him to, be in maybe the lower half of the top 10. I know we've had this debate and discussion before, but in my mind, a superstar is somebody who can put the team on his back. And for the past several years, Ovechkin's had plenty of opportunity to do that, and he's never done it. He's always made excuses. It's always been pointing the finger elsewhere instead of looking in the mirror and holding himself accountable. He's supposed to be the superstar on that team, and with that comes the responsibility of coming through in the clutch, and he's never been able to do that. So, in my mind, I'll agree that I don't think 18 is necessarily fair, but I can totally see him not being in the top 5.
Yeah.
I think that's a fair criticism of Ovechkin, because he has not stepped up on the big stage, even at the Olympics either. But you can't discount the impact he has in the regular season in terms of his ranking. Like I guess I'd have to think about where he fits now, but I thought too much was made last season of his plus minus. He's for the most part, the majority of his career, he's been a plus player. And now last year, it was an absurd minus season for him. And it was to me reminiscent of when Paul Coffey had more than 100 points, he was a minus player.
Right.
That kind of goofy season, but. And it's interesting. I just talked to, by coincidence, I talked to Barry Trotz this morning, and I had actually called to talk to him about Berhovsky sort of being a surprise rookie this season, or at least a rookie that we didn't have up there with, Kuznetsov and Gaudreau and Drouin and so forth. But then he's obviously out of the gate. But our conversation ended with Trotz telling me that Ovechkin hasn't been anything like everybody told him he would be. Everybody said, he's going to be difficult for you. You're going to want to play a defensive game, and he's going to be a little rebellious to that. And he said, and nothing could be farther from the truth, that he actually has been, very coachable. And, Trotz has sold him on the idea, and I thought this was brilliant, but it's also who Barry Trotz is. He said, look, I can't show you any ways to improve offensively because you have such gifts that you know how to do that on your own. But what I can show you is when you don't have the puck, how to get it back. Right. And I think that was really a good sell. Ovechkin probably has not lived up to expectation for sure. And I wouldn't be, Julie wouldn't have him in the top 5. But, I can live with that because he has not had impacts on both sides of the puck. But he's still a guy that people go to watch. People pay to see him play. There's no doubt about that. You want to see Ovechkin play. He's very dynamic, and his goals. When you can get a 225-pound bull, charging to the net with that much skill, and personality, it's unbelievable.
I think the distinction here is that I think, in my mind, has lived up to expectations on an individual level. You know, the like you said, the skill that he brings, and you know, the ability to get people out of their chair, and you know, like you said, the personality. He's been a great marketing tool for the NHL, but has he necessarily been a great marketing tool for the Washington Capitals? And what he's been able to do for the team, that's where he falls short for me.
I don't know about that. Like that, I got to do the very last bit there because I think the Capitals have marketed the hell out of him, and I think they've got a lot of mileage out of him.
It hasn't translated.
Hasn't translated into wins, but then you could also argue in the last couple of years Crosby hasn't done that either. I mean, he's had the last couple of years. He's also, I mean, Crosby has a history, of course, of doing it, and he did it for Team Canada. He did it. You know, he has won a Stanley Cup early in his career, but the last couple of years he hasn't exactly taken the Penguins on his back either.
But the criticism of Crosby would be a lot more if he hadn't won the Cup in 2009. I mean, he at least has one Cup in his pocket. And, you know, I mean, but Ovechkin, you know, what did he have? One run to the conference final when they, I believe it was, or the second round of the playoffs. They really haven't had a lot of success with him in the postseason, and as we all know, success in the postseason is where you make your reputation in this league.
Yeah, that's no question.
Yeah,
and I think that's what we're going to see out of Stamkos. You know, like I think that Stamkos this year will get that postseason recognition, and could, you know, he hasn't won an Art Ross yet. You know, he hasn't won an MVP. There's certain things Stamkos hasn't done that I think he will do. See, when I always, you know, and the one thing another thing I'll mention to Ovechkin, which is based on what you said, Kevin. The last thing I'll say about Ovi is that you know, I bet Dale Hunter would be like, that's Ovechkin's being like a new puppy in a new home right now. Like, he's going to be good for the first 2 months. He's going to go outside, right? But we have a new puppy here who was really sweet for 2 months and then became the devil's child. But still a great dog. So you have to sort of be careful a little bit. Like, I think I want to see where he is in December. I think, you know what I mean. There's something I wonder about Ovechkin.
Here's one final thought, and I think it plays into what Julie was talking about too. And this would make me even rethink my position on Ovechkin. If we just draft it all over again, you know, nobody has all the teams. We all the draft. Where are they going to draft? I mean, you know, Stamkos, Crosby is going to go ahead of them. There are, I think, 4 or 5 defensemen that would go ahead of them.
Yeah.
You know, a goalie or two. So yeah, you know, I when I think about it in those terms, I think why the Hockey News have them rated where it does.
Yeah, they went. It does make sense. You know, that it did surprise me to see him that low. But what really kind of surprised me more than anything was the fact that, you know, there were so many years where that was like the easiest debate and blog you could write. You know, who's better, Crosby or Ovechkin? And that's just not the case now. I think there could be a who's better, Crosby or Stamkos debate coming at some point. Because I think, you know, when you look at all those top highly touted players, I think of Stamkos, Tavares, McKinnon, and Crosby. These first overall picks, who to me were the 4 that, you know, Patrick Kane's in that, not quite up in that realm, but close as far as what was promised to them when they were drafted. I mean, Tavares was like, you know, he was the real deal. People were tanking for Tavares. People were going to tank for, you know, Stamkos too. It's the same kind of thing. So I think that he's got the chance to do it, to actually challenge Crosby as one of the best players in the league as time goes on here. You know, I think that's what we have to see, and I really kind of think that Stamkos is good for the NHL. I think he's a great guy. I think he's a great person. I think he's a really interesting character, and I hope he gets more publicity. And I hope that, you know, and I don't know if that means he's got to leave Tampa to get that publicity, because I don't think he will leave Tampa. I get the impression he's not going to ever leave Tampa. Just a few times I've talked to him, you know, he does like that walking through the airport, Kevin. He does like that thing.
Well, there's a lot to be said for that. I mean, we've all talked to players who like, you know, just to have a private life. You know, they love being in a public profession, but, you know, for a few hours a day, they'd like to have a private life. And
yeah,
you can get that in, you know, Tampa and Carolina and Nashville and a few places. You cannot get that in Canada, and you know, in some of the major American cities as well.
I honestly don't think that Steven Stamkos would be stalked in Toronto. I mean, Phil Kessel is pretty much left. You know, after he's not at the rink, he's pretty much left to his own, and so is Dion Phaneuf, and they're the 2 biggest stars on the Leafs. You know, I don't know whether Stamkos in a couple years will end up in Toronto or end up in a big media market, but I think the possibility is there, and it's sort of set up for him to choose where he wants to go, because after next July, he has the no move in his contract, and if he doesn't decide to extend his deal with Tampa, he basically can go to unrestricted free agency at the end of the 2015-16 season. So
That's
it's set up
completely
for him
his
to go
call.
anywhere.
Yeah, it's his call. He'll stay there if he wants to stay there, and this the thing surprised you. Like, I didn't expect Bobby Ryan to sign a long-term deal in Ottawa. I really didn't. But people go when you go. There's something to be said about going to play for a team, and this is why sometimes at the trade deadline when people make these comments like, "Oh, they trade for him, they'll never get him to stay there," and yet sometimes they do. I mean, Ryan Callahan's an example. Like, Tampa. I didn't think he was going to stay in Tampa. But sometimes they do. Sometimes they go to a new place, they play there, and they actually do fall in love with the situation, and they do stay there.
Yeah.
And I think the same sticks for Stamkos, as much as he said he wants to play in other places at some, or he as much as he said he would love to play in Canada. But yeah, so that was now on to the fun news of the day. Josh, you got an injury to report?
Yes, I do. Big blow to the LA Kings today. Rich Hammond in Los Angeles, who's with the OC Register, does a lot of stuff, all Kings, spoke to Dean Lombardi this morning, and Lombardi told him that Marian Gaborik is out and no timetable for his return. Now, Rich Hammond also says that the injury apparently isn't new. It's related to what kept him out in the preseason. But, guys, that's not a good sign in L.A. if you have no idea when one of your best scorers is out. But, I mean, it's nothing new with Marian Gaborik. I mean, I told you months ago that he's part of my all-glass team. But
well, this is the surprising thing, that he hasn't been hurt yet in LA. That to me was the surprising part of it all, right? But hopefully he's okay, because I'd love to watch. I love the way he and Kopitar work together.
Yeah, he changed that team too. Like, they had every element, but what they didn't have was a dangerous scorer and the breakaway threat, the home run threat, and he was that, and it really made that team. It completed that team, in my opinion. Plus, I think getting Tanner Pearson and Toffoli, they matured. It gave him a little more offensive bite as well. But it was really Gaborik, and we saw that in the playoffs. I mean, they have all the aspects of a great team, but they didn't have that great score, and then he gave him that. So that would be a really tough loss for that team.
Yeah, that's it. I don't think without Gaborik last year they get past Anaheim. My theory. I think Anaheim goes further. I mean, it's close, but it's.
Yeah, they for sure wouldn't have got past Chicago. I don't think.
Yeah.
I mean, they needed everybody on the train when they.
He scored some huge goals against Anaheim, though. If you remember the first couple games of that series, didn't he get like an overtime or 2 overtime goals? Or I'm trying to remember tying goals. I remember the Anaheim series was just that was.
He scored a tying goal late in the third period in one of the first 2 games in Anaheim. But you know what? You sort of have to write into your expectations of Marian Gaborik, similar to a guy like Joffrey Lupul. These guys are going to be out for 15 to 20 games at least during the year, so you have to consider them a 60-game player or a 55-game player, because they're always going to get hurt. There's always going to be something. And the LA Kings have enough. They have the requisite depth in their roster. I don't know if they have a scorer on the level of Gaborik, playing in Manchester, but they do have a lot of quality forwards, and I think they'll be able to, obviously have somebody fill in the void, and they'll make the playoffs. I mean, I don't think their position in the playoffs is going to be dependent on Marian Gaborik.
Probably not, but it's the Western Conference, and I think they're making the playoffs. But Kevin?
Yeah, no, I agree completely with Mike. I mean, I just think that they've learned now to play, their style of game, and they have enough scoring to do that. But as I said, I just think Gaborik just takes them to another level. And even when he doesn't score, I mean, it just changes the way you have to defend against the Kings when you have him on the ice, because he's that breakaway threat. He's the guy on the stretch pass. He can do so many different things. And I thought too that he gave Kopitar he made Kopitar a better player, just as Kopitar made him a better scorer.
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely, I agree. Here's a funny thing I picked up off the internet today. Yesterday we were talking about how violent the sport has gotten, and how we haven't had any suspensions this year, which is kind of surprising, because last year we had at least, we were talking maybe 10, or you said 10, I think, Josh, last year at this time, and multiple game suspensions, and not that I'm trying to like knock on wood get anybody suspended here, but there's this is a gift that was sent to me that I thought was crazy. This is 1953. All right, this is a 1953 incident between Boom Boom Geoffrion and Ron Murphy of the Rangers, to Montreal and the Rangers, and this was a stick fight that they had on the ice. Have you guys seen this? This is crazy. Geoffrion was suspended. I want to ask you guys to try to figure out after you watch this little thing. I'm bringing it up now. How many games Geoffrion was suspended in this incident? So here it's going to come up right now. Here we go. So this to me was shocking. All right, let me see if I can share this here. All right, so it's not moving. Let me go back here. There's one there's one that is moving. Here we go. All right, so this is the end of it here. So it's going to move back. Here's the beginning. They are swinging. I know it might be hard to see, but they're actually swinging sticks at each other like swords. They're just reeling back and swinging their sticks. I mean, that's completely Geoffrion knocking over Murphy with his stick to the side of his head. I mean, this is a guy who's not wearing a helmet.
That's worse than McSorley on Brashear.
Right. So how many games?
I'd say 20 to 25.
25. All right, Mike, what is your thought?
I'd say less than 10. I'll go 8.
All right, Julie, what do you think?
Are you talking about what he got or what he should get now?
No, let's talk about what he got. Do you know what he got, Kevin? Do you remember this?
No, I don't. I'm doing what he would get in today's game.
Okay, yeah, let's do both. So, what do you think he got, Kevin? And what do you think?
2 games.
2 games. Okay, you think he should get in this day and age? He would get 20 to 20 games. You're saying?
Yeah.
I think he would get what McSorley got for Brashear, which what was it, 25 games? So he should get 25. I think he got less than 10. I'll say 8.
What do you think, Julie?
Well, I think that if Boom Boom Geoffrion had been suspended for any lengthy amount of time, everybody would know about it. So I'm going to go with possibly even no suspension at all.
Way to play the system, Jules. What do you think, Josh?
$1. I mean, sorry, 1 game.
2 games?
One game.
Well, 1 game. All right, well, he was indeed suspended for 8 games.
Wow. Great call.
Which is a good call, Mike. And that is pretty crazy, though. I mean, this is 1954, and without helmets, this is a sword fight on the ice. So I just think that's, and then this day and age, I think 25 least.
Sword play was acceptable in that era. I mean, it was, it's the way you roll. I was actually, by the way, the most heinous act I've ever seen in hockey was as a fan. I was in Olympia, and for the famous Dennis Polonich Paymont stick swinging, and I was actually sitting on the corner. So I was looking down the ice, so it was actually happening in front of me. Not a lot of people saw that because it was behind the play, but just because of the coincidence of where I was sitting, it sort of happened in front of me, and that was. Anybody who's watching the baseball playoffs, like he swung as hard as Alex Gordon at Paymont. I'm talking about swinging at Polonich. It was incredible, and you could actually see Polonich's nose moved 4 inches.
Really?
Oh yeah, you could. It just moved right over. It was just so evident, and it looked like not only did it look like a crime scene on the ice, but it was my habit to go out between periods, and I was by the Red Wings dressing room, and it would look like a crime scene all the way to the dressing room as they hauled them off. There was just blood, everywhere. And
who was it against again?
It was the Colorado Avalanche. It was Paymont took a stick swing, a 2-hander, like a baseball swing at Dennis Polonich. It's one of the, probably I would say it's in the top 5 or 6 stick swinging incidents.
Wow, I'm trying to find it on any.
It'd be Colorado Rockies.
There is no video available of it.
None.
There's no video available. It was not a televised game.
Wow.
That's why I've written about it, from a historical perspective and interviewed people who saw it. But it's interesting. A lot of people who were at the game, including players, didn't see it either because it happened away from the play. I just, in the book that I just finished, I actually quoted the Red Wings statistician who was a big Dennis Polonich fan and was watching him on the ice. so he remembered the play. But it was like it's hard to describe the level of violence that happened on that play.
Not to equate this incident to that incident because the end result was not even close, but the Chris Simon stick swinging incident on Ryan Holwig.
Yeah.
I think it was maybe 7 or 8 years ago, where it was essentially a baseball swing right at the face of Holwig.
Yeah.
And Chris Simon, I think, got suspended for 15 or 20 games. It was pretty. I mean, Holwig hit him along the boards, and then Simon just reacted and swung the stick right at him. So it was a really
brutal thing I've ever seen live. The fun thing to talk about. The most brutal thing I've ever seen live is I remember one time Peter Svoboda getting laid out.
I was there. That was going to be mine. You can't.
That was yours. You were at that game.
I was there.
Wow, I didn't even think you were alive at that point.
That was my Christmas present. My parents got me like 4th row behind the glass tickets one year for Christmas, or maybe it was my birthday. But that was the game. I'll never forget it. Everybody, no joke, thought he was dead.
We did. That's the first time I ever thought. And I was there in the game with my mom at the time too. I don't even know what year that was. But
96.
96. Right. So you were a yearly tiny one there. You were.
I was a pipsqueak.
Yeah. Yeah, but Svoboda laid there for a long time, and I have never heard a building that quiet ever since then.
Well, the crazy part about that and why it was so quiet, like nobody knew anything. Like there was nothing. There was no Twitter. There was no radio.
There was no television. There was no monitor.
There was nothing. There was a dude nearby who had the like headphone radio thing back in the day.
Yep.
And he was listening to the radio, but the people on the radio didn't know. Knew. So it was just we're all just like, okay, he's motionless, and it was forever, and there was blood coming out of his head. It was bad.
It was silent, and it was a long time.
It was for sure, wasn't it?
Yeah. It might have been. It might have been Brashear, and they took him off the ice, and he didn't move. It wasn't like he got the high and like I'm okay or anything. They took him off the ice, and then eventually, sometime in the next period, they put up like a text message on the board because there was no video screen. I don't even think at the time, where they said, Peter Svoboda is moving, he's in the hospital, and he's but that was all you got, was that he was alive basically, and yeah, that was. I will never forget that.
I won't either.
And
totally.
I also saw one in
Canadian.
Yeah, in Madison Square Garden.
They won. The Flyers won that game in overtime.
They did. That's so funny. That's one of my most memorable games. The other thing I saw the Rangers. Oh, man.
That was also the game. I'll tell you what. As a side note, not to interrupt your story, but that was also the game where I yelled at a guy. So this guy, and there was a couple in front of me, and this guy was telling this girl, he was a big man, he knew all this stuff about hockey and blah, 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 blah. And I remember telling my dad at one point, I was like, should I tell him he's wrong? And my dad was like,
you were
no.
You were not even probably even a decade old.
Don't do that. He's like, no, Julie, don't do that.
Yeah,
and then at overtime came his girlfriend or wife or whoever wanted to stay, and he wanted to leave to get a jump on the parking. I yelled at him.
Nice.
I was like, you should stay.
Nice.
And they stayed, and the woman was very excited because they won.
Very nice.
It's like, they're going to win. You need to stay.
Nice.
And they did.
That's something. I mean, I really hope we never see anything or a player gets seriously injured to the point of death on the ice, because I think that's just. I've always said that'll kill fighting right away if that happens during a fight. Because I saw a fight one time in Madison Square Garden with the Rangers and the Flyers where I thought somebody was actually Todd Fedoruk was knocked out, and I thought he was dead too. That was the other time, and I was covering that game, and I was like, this is really bad. Mike?
No, I just in the chat, I gave you the YouTube link to the Svoboda. It was Mark Bureau of the Canadiens who hit him at center ice, and
here it is. I'll bring it up.
Brutal. Show it.
All right, here we go. Let me bring it up
here.
here.
It's about 25 seconds or 30 seconds into the.
Okay, here we go.
We can continue on with something else while we're queuing that.
It's coming up right now. I got it. Here we go. All right. Here we go. Coming up. So here's this is 19 seconds in. This is the fight, I guess, that followed it.
No, this was the fight before. Apparently, I just scanned through it quickly, but there was a fight before, and Svoboda is on a power play. He's carrying the puck, and the Canadian
Right through
player.
center ice. Yep. Oh, there he is. Okay, here we go. Let me go back a little bit. Here's Shel Samuelson.
30 seconds, Zach.
30
Not a
seconds. All
minute.
right. Thanks.
That's right after this.
Okay. Okay, I'm at 37. All right, let's see what I got here.
This is great. This is great television here.
Yeah, I know. Well, this is good if you're listening on the audio podcast. This is really good.
Well, while we're waiting, why don't we get Josh's in other injury news?
No, here it comes.
Here it comes. Sean Antoski. There's a good name from the past.
Wow.
You gotta love that.
I wish there was a fast forward on YouTube.
There is, but not an easy one. All right, so we're getting there. This is almost coming up here. So
I know it. I just watched it, so it's got to be.
I'm afraid of doing anything. Are they gonna? Okay. All right. I will pause it when we get there. Let's do. I'll pause when we get to it. But Josh, what else is going on in hockey? Oh, here we go. Here we go. Right here. Sorry, stay here. Stay here. This is it. This is right. I remember this very well. So that was it, right? Yeah. And
that would be that's a Rafi Torres head hit there. That's like a.
Yeah, that was crazy, and that's brutal.
Oh God, that's. Ugh.
Yeah. Lindros and era. All right, there you go.
I'm glad I found that.
Very nice. That was a really nice thing to show everybody today. To go back to your lunch, Josh. What news do we have?
Yes, Jordan Eberle looks like he is hurt in Edmonton. Second day in a row he's not on the ice. He may not be playing tonight. And also the signing that happened with the Boston Bruins today with Simone Gagne, 1-year deal at $600,000.
I think it's a good thing for the Bruins. Picking up Simone Gagne is really a good move, and not just I like Simone. I admit that I know Simone. But he's a really good pickup in that he can play the point on the power play. He can kill a penalty. You can play on your first, second, third, or fourth line, and that's exactly. And he also brings that experience. They kind of lost with Iginla and Recchi as far as the elders. The Bruins like to have that elder statesman type person there. So what are your thoughts on the signing, Kev?
Yeah, I don't think you can go wrong with that. I mean, the price is right. That's basically minimum wage at the NHL. And the Bruins are off to a 1-3 start, and you're looking for ways to put a little charge in. And just as you said, he is a well-respected veteran player whose presence in the room, and he's very versatile. He's been there, done it. And can fill many different roles. So I like the signing.
I don't know if Gagne has it in him to score over 30 goals anymore like he did back in Philadelphia or even the offense he provided in LA. But the Bruins need a little offense. I mean, they only scored 1 goal yesterday against Rito Berra and the Avalanche, a team that had not played well in the first couple games, had been shut out by Minnesota twice, and they had Svedberg in goal for his first NHL start, I believe. And Danny Briere scores a goal with less than 1 second left to go in regulation to give the Avs the win.
I was prophetic, wasn't I? Didn't I mention right before that they were playing together? That McKinnon was playing with Briere? Yeah.
You did. You said Briere was moved to center, and it was a nice little patient move and shot, and with less than a second left in regulation. But
this is the thing about Danny. I want to throw this out there. Again, person I know, but honestly, what Briere brings to the table is this. I mean, this is why I was so frustrated last year with Montreal. Is Briere will score goals at big times for you, and he still does it. He still did it last year. He eliminated Boston in Game 7, right? And he gets this goal against Boston. And there was no bigger goal for the Colorado Avalanche than this goal. I mean, when in all perspective, this season, when you scored 1 goal. They scored 1 goal, and now they're about to either get a tie or a loss in Boston, and they needed this goal. This was like a huge exhale from Patrick Waugh and everybody around, and that's what Briere brings to your team. That's why I don't think he's over the hill yet.
he can give them some secondary offense, and that's what you need from a veteran player. And if they get in the playoffs, he's somebody who, as we saw last year with Montreal, even playing fourth line minutes, he can still score and score big goals. So I mean, yeah, it was a big victory for the Avs, especially with their backup goaltender. And now they play in Toronto tonight. Varlamov will start against the Leafs, and we'll see what happens.
Yep, I'm going to be heading to the Anaheim Flyers game tonight, so we'll see if the Flyers who have, we talked about this the other day, the most brutal schedule in the NHL to start the season I've ever seen. I want to run this down real quick because this is something that we talked about off the air, I think. But check this schedule out. Okay, so this is nuts. This is, if you think that a team is going to get off to a good start with this schedule, this is just, all right, I'm sorry, I'm bringing it up now. I should have been a little more prepared, but I'm not. Here we go. Schedule. Regular season schedule. Sorry. All right, here's the schedule that they've got. So this is what's going on. So they have so far, as you remember, they opened in Boston. No. Then they played the Devils. Okay, the Devils is the easiest thing they've got going. They lost the Devils. The Canadiens, playoff team. Tonight's the Ducks. Then they go on the road to Dallas and Chicago and Pittsburgh. They come home to Detroit and L.A., and then they go on the road to Tampa to end the month of October. All right, so think about that schedule. I mean, it's like Boston, New Jersey, Montreal, Anaheim, Dallas, Chicago, Pittsburgh, Detroit, L.A., and Tampa. I don't think you can get a worse schedule to open the season than that.
Cake. Sounds like cake to me.
They could be in the Connor McDavid's Jack Eichel sweepstakes by the end of October. By the way,
at the end of October, people are going to talk about it for sure. So it's really tricky, And so someone pointed out to me that something the Bruins and Steven Stamkos have in common was that they both got 11 shots last night. The Sabres and Steven Stamkos.
Sabres, yeah.
The Sabres and Steven Stamkos both had 11 shots last night.
How many of us were stunned, though, by Nolan's criticism after the game?
Yeah. That was crazy. Mike, what did he say again?
He was stunned by it. It was true.
But you can't say that in an NHL dressing room with professional players. Like anybody who's been around the league knows, players take those kind of comments seriously, and that's just the quickest way to lose the team. For sure.
He said that the game resembled an NHL team against a Pee Wee team, and the thing is, I mean, if you look at the game itself, and I watched, I'd say half of it. It was pretty much the case. I mean, I hate to say it, but they were outshot 44-12. Anaheim was never in danger in the game. They were up 3-0, and then the Sabres got a goal to make it 3-1, and then ended up 5-1. They've been dominated by a Columbus team that was short their top three forwards. They were outshot by 2-1 in that game. They went to Chicago and actually played well the first two periods, and then lost when Chicago scored four goals in the third, and then come back on Columbus Day in an afternoon matinee and lay an egg. And I think what Nolan's trying to do here is, you've got a veteran core here that they brought in for fairly significant money, guys like Gianta and Georges, and they want these guys to sort of stand up. I think everybody knows that this organization, they have a lot of young players. They brought in some veterans. They're not as good as they were last year, and they finished dead last in the league. But they also want to develop some respect and some esprit de corps. And if they don't want to lay down and go 0-82, and they're not going to do that. But I think they want to show some progress and show some building on with some of the young kids. And having a team that's going to get trounced every game isn't a way to do that. So they want to be competitive, but I don't think they want to win. But they want to be competitive, and they want to show some progress.
Well, yeah, and I agree with Kevin. I mean, that goes a long way in that room. I mean, even if it's right, if it's correct, that goes a really long way in that room to be a problem. Anyone who thinks that Ryan Callahan doesn't have moves, did you check out his goal last night? Check this one out. This is a good one. Here is this one. This is let me see. So I'll make this a little bigger for you guys. Not that big. There we go. I wish this was easier. Sorry. But yeah, this is not a schlub he's doing this against. Okay, this is
Subban?
This is PK Subban he beats on this goal. All right, so then PK's just like kind of standing still there. But he just completely, I mean, Ryan Callahan's got, not exactly a slouch, but I don't think people expect him to be the kind of player who makes this kind of a move. I mean, Subban is literally, I don't think Subban expects him to make this either, obviously, because he doesn't even really put a stick on him.
that being said, PK Subban is, his ascendance to being an all-star defenseman is not in his own zone. He's an offensive force.
No, for sure.
I mean, there is a reason Michel Therrien has sat him on occasion in Montreal, and it has nothing to do with his offense. It has to do with his play in his own zone. So, not to say he's a pylon, but you can beat him in his own zone.
Yeah, you can for sure. And that was So finally, I wanted to talk a little bit, since we had Julie today, about Eichel versus McDavid. All right, because this is and I know Kevin and Julie are probably two of the best people to talk about this. Yesterday if you check out the Cranky Old Hockey Writers show that I posted, which is a new podcast, which I definitely want you to watch because it's got Kevin Allen and Eric Duhashik on it, and that's enough right there. And actually, also because Cranky Old Hockey Writers show shortens to cows, I figured out today. Anyway, so there you go. But so Eichel versus McDavid, and one of the things we talked about yesterday on the show was Eric Duhashik saying that how important it would be for a player, a Canadian star, to go to a Canadian team, like for Connor McDavid perhaps to be on a Canadian team, and if Calgary's got the first pick overall, which could happen, or if they end up to the second pick or what have you. How important that would be. Julie, what's your argument between McDavid and Eichel? I mean, you've seen them both now.
You asking me?
Yes, to you. Sorry.
I think that if you have enough tools on your team to have a player of McDavid's abilities and skill set that will complement him, that you should pick him. I think if you have nothing, you need to have Jack Eichel. Because Connor McDavid, in my mind, and what I've seen from him, he is, I don't want to say he's a one-dimensional player, he's like a 1.5-dimensional player. Because his defensive game still needs work. But if you have players who can play with him, if you're a team, we'll say, like Calgary, who has the parts that are building and progressing in that capacity, he's your guy. If you need a guy who can do it all, who can play both ends of the ice, who can put the team on his back, who can do everything you need a hockey player to do at any given point in any game, you need Jack Eichel.
That's a good one, Kev. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, I think what you have is sort of a Wayne Gretzky style thinking center in Connor McDavid, and then the comparison I would use for Eichel, even though we don't know how mean he is yet, but I would say it's Mark Messier. It's sort of the power game versus the finesse game. I mean, Eichel is a strong, charging player who's very skilled, and McDavid is a thinker. He's a guy that sees plays develop before everybody else does. I mean, you can't go wrong with either player. I've had lengthy discussions with scouts on this, and they just love both players. And I think Julie is right. It'll come down to what your team needs at the time, but you're going to be happy with either one. Getting to what we were talking about with Eric Duhashik, the big question is whether these guys are going to be generational players. We think they are. We think there's, that these guys are in, as long as we're stratifying, there's really, really, really good prospects, and that these guys are a half step ahead of that. So if they're, those type of players, then, I think both these guys are going to have, a big impact too. Because, what Julie said about Connor McDavid was also uttered about Wayne Gretzky when he was 17 as well. That he was just a great passer, but with that passing work at the NHL level, all that kind of stuff. So, but I think both of them are exceptional players. And now the third element now is Hanifin. I mean, I know he hasn't had a rocket start in college hockey, but Hanifin.
He only played one game.
Right, exactly. But but I know scouts just love this guy.
What do you think of Hanifin?
Well, just to get back to Jack kind of quickly, is over the weekend, BU also only played one game, and it was against UMass, and BU won 8-1. And Jack had 2 goals, 2 assists And if you go onto BU's Twitter feed, you can watch all of the goals, and you can just see like what Jack can do is just absurd, just mind blowing, and it begs the question: how good does a freshman need to be in order to win the Hobey Baker? And we got into it. I was at the Icebreaker at Notre Dame, and I was talking with a couple other writers, and they're like, well, blah blah blah, he's just a freshman, he's 17. But I said, yeah, but James Van Riemsdyk was just as highly touted when he came to New Hampshire, and nobody ever mentioned him and the Hobey in his freshman year. So you really can't say, oh, it won't happen, because you watch Eichel play, and he's already in my top 3 after one game. Now, flip side, looking at Hanifin, one of the things that was very interesting about him and in talking about his development is he is legitimately 17. He just turned 17. So whereas Jack Eichel and Hanifin and Werenski are all in the same boat in the fact that they're in this upcoming draft class. Jack's different. He turns 18 next month. But both Zach and Noah don't turn 18 until next summer. So they are legitimately like rising seniors in high school playing college hockey.
Right.
It's crazy. So it's one of those things where you kind of have to give them some time to get their feet wet, especially in the defensive game, especially in a program like BC, because they're not necessarily known for their offensive defenseman, which is what he is. He is not your Banff, stay at home, let me, pound you into the wall defenseman, which is, kind of what the type of defenseman that BC is known for. So he's going to be involved heavily in their transition game and providing offense from the defense and quarterbacking the power play, and all of that will come. So I'm curious to see how they do coming up in 2 weeks. They will play Michigan and Michigan State, I believe. No, they don't play them that weekend. Scratch that. They don't play until December. But they are going to be playing Big Ten tournament opponents. So that's what I'm interested to see. And now that he's got his feet wet, it was a tough game against UMass Lowell. It was their home opener. They raised the Hockey East Championship banner. A lot of pressure on the Riverhawks to, impress the home crowd, which was a packed stadium, which was awesome to see. So I'm giving him a pass for the first game. He didn't get any points, but it wasn't like he played awful.
I think it's amazing that these players are playing college hockey. I just want to throw that out there. just that these are the top guys, 2 of the top guys. McDavid isn't, but the other 2 guys are in college hockey. Kevin.
Yeah, no, it's it's really changed. Like I talked about this the other day, and I actually talked to somebody at USA Hockey for a story I'm doing about the fact that when I looked it up yesterday, or 2 days ago, it was 22.5% Americans in the NHL, which. I've covered the league long enough to remember when it was 13, and I've used this line before. But in 1969, the United States sent more men to the moon than they sent to the National Hockey League. There were 6 Americans made lunar orbits and only 5. So that's how far the NHL has come. And the fact that college hockey, when I was growing up, was not a path to get to the NHL. And it certainly is now. You get great players from Europe, from the CHL, and from college hockey, and nobody looks down upon Eichel for choosing that path, which to me is another indicator of that. How far the American sport has come. But the final argument on McDavid and Eichel is simply that, and why they may be generational players. It's been a long time since we've seen players that can take over a game like McDavid and Eichel can, because they can do that. I mean, so many scouts have told me about when they've played against each other, it really is like Eichel versus McDavid. One will take over the game and the other will take over the game. It's pretty dynamic what these guys can do, and that's why I think the comparison to superstars like Gretzky or Messier is apt, because both of those players could do that as well.
Well, I can't wait. I mean, I've yet to see either of these guys play live, and I just really want to. And I think that if you get a chance to, I know somebody in the chat room said they have a ticket to go see McDavid play soon
Buffalo, October 22nd.
Buffalo.
The Otters versus Niagara Ice Dogs at the First Niagara Center.
There you go. So, yep, all these players are currently playing in America too, right? Because David is playing in the U.S. right now too, even though he's playing in the Canadian Junior League. So, yeah, this is it's good. It's a good time for all this stuff. Well, it's been a great show. Julie, where are you?
Well, somebody guessed it.
Yeah, there's a lot of Blue Jackets pictures behind you. So we're going to say you are in Columbus.
I am in Columbus. I am here to see the Dallas Stars play, and I'm very excited. I'm hopeful. I don't know if it'll actually happen tonight, but I'm hopeful that Curtis McKenzie will get his NHL start tonight.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, enjoy the game. I will be at Anaheim, and I mean, I'll be in Philly to watch Anaheim.
Against Anaheim.
Yeah, exactly. All right, guys. Talk to you soon, guys. Remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey. We'll be back again tomorrow. See you then. Cool.